So, just in case, I'm going to do some introductions. My name is Justin, and I am one of the pastors at One Life. Hopefully, you know that at this point. If not, and you're joining us, so I'm the teaching and vision pastor at One Life Church. I've got a couple friends on here that are going to help me facilitate and teach tonight. The first is my good friend Nathan. So Nathan, tell us just a little bit just about yourself. You're married, have a couple kids. Tell us about that family.
Yeah, my wife Emily and I have been married 14 and a half. And we have three boys. They are 9, 7, and 2. And we've lived in North Carolina for almost the whole time we've been married. And my day job is I'm a counselor. That's why I'm here, I guess.
Awesome. Good. I have my other friend, Dawn. Dawn, hi.
Hi.
And Dawn, tell us a little bit about yourself and that good-looking other half of yours over there. So,
and
your daughter right back there. Tell us about yourself, Dawn.
So I'm Dawn and married to Michael, my handsome firefighter, my little 6-year-old who was sitting out by the fire with her grandma but has decided to come in. And then this is Cadence, and then Cole is our 9-year-old son, and I'm a family doctor in the daytime and a mommy when I'm not at work.
Great. And then my bestest friend, Nicole, aka my wife, she is also joining us. Hi, Nicole.
Hello.
And can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I stay at home and homeschool our 2 kiddos, Marcus and Madeline. They're 9 and 11.
Awesome.
Anything else?
And you also lead part of our Kids Life ministry, right?
I do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very cool. Well, so I'm going to start, and I'm going to do just a little bit of a teaching portion, and I'm going to give us a foundation from where we're going to share tonight. And then I'm going to have my 3 friends. They're going to, thank you, Michael. She did marry down. I do appreciate that. All right, so I'm going to have my 3 friends share some of their stories, successes and failures along the way of having conversations with our kids that are really tough. And so I just want to go ahead and say that right up front, that as we're raising our kids, as we're leading kids, that it's hard work, but it's a great responsibility and great opportunity. And we have to have some really tough conversations. We have to have conversations about things like sex, and we have to have conversations about things like religion, and we have to have conversations about things like different stages of life and what the body is doing. And we have different conversations like anxiety, depression, and all different kinds of things. And now, with our current reality with COVID-19, this is another one of those really complicated and tough conversations that we're having. And what better place than the church, for the church to step in and help us and resource us to have some of these really tough conversations. So that's what we're talking about tonight, is how do we have those hard conversations. So let me start. I'm going to start actually in the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 17. And it says this. It says that grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. And so this is really the foundation from which we are going to have this conversation tonight. We want to have this conversation and learn how to have the conversations with our kids, learn to disciple our kids, learn to lead our kids from the foundation of grace and truth, because that's who Jesus is. And Jesus is the perfect picture of who God is. And so ultimately, as parents, we want to point our kiddos to God. We want to point them to God. And so we want to show them what Jesus looks like because Jesus looks like God. And Jesus came to show us what grace and truth look like. So every conversation we have, we need to learn how to have those conversations through the lens of grace and truth. So I'm going to share my screen here with you. And let's see. And I'm going to show you we're going to call the grace and truth matrix. All right. And so let me define these terms for us. First of all, the word grace, when we talk about the word grace, we are talking about being present with our kids in relationship. Okay. And so when we're talking about grace, we're talking about relationship. So for us to think about that, God's grace was to show up in the person of Jesus. He came near to us. He took on flesh and walked among us. That is his greatest showing of grace. So grace is about presence and relationship, and truth is very pragmatic or practical, and it's about responsibility. Okay. So on this matrix, what you'll see is you'll see high grace and low grace, high truth and low truth. And so when we're having conversations with our kids, we can approach those conversations from a place of high grace and high truth. We can approach those conversations from a place of high truth, low grace, or we can approach them from low truth, low grace, or approach them from high grace, low truth. So I'm going to walk you through this matrix and describe the relationships we can have with our kids and how the conversations can look as we work our way through each one of these quadrants. We're going to start in the bottom right-hand corner, which is high truth, low grace. And the reason we're going to start there is because that is my go-to. I am typically on the side of high pragmatism, high practical, high responsibility. And whenever I'm not healthy, can fall into a place of low presence, low relationship. And that creates an overwhelming culture. If you go to One Life Church, you hear me talk about this all the time, that an overwhelming culture leads to exhaustion. It leads to distance. It leads to resentment. But that is the overwhelming culture. And the description words that we want to use right there are control, and it's very unpredictable. And so if I, as a parent, am leading my kids and I'm raising my kids in a high truth, low grace culture, it's going to be very unpredictable. They have no idea what dad is going to show up every morning. It's going to be very unpredictable. And I'm always going to be looking for ways to control the conversations, to control control my kids, control their actions, control their beliefs. Does that make sense? All right, so that is an overwhelming culture, high truth, low grace. Let's just move our way to the left. Low truth, low grace is the checkout culture. The best image there is sticking your head in the sand. The description words are to be disengaged and self-preservation. When I think about the crisis that we're facing right now with COVID-19, I think of saying to our kids, like, this isn't affecting us, so it doesn't matter. All right. So I'm disengaging, and it's just about self-preservation. So if we're okay, like if the 4 of us, the 5 of us, the 6 of us are okay, if my immediate family is okay, then everything is all right. And I'm going to pretend like everything else isn't happening. That's the checkout culture. That's low truth, low grace, low responsibility, low relationship, low presence, low practical. Let's move our way up to high grace and low truth, and that is the hangout culture. This would be the culture where, as a parent, I think the goal is for me to be best friends with my kid. And so my kid might be 6 and I might be 36, and I want to have the same conversations with my 6-year-old that I'm having with my 36-year-old friend next door. And so the description words there are, there's no boundaries. So there's nothing off limits. We're going to talk about everything. I'm going to talk exactly the same way to my 10-year-old as I would with a 35-year-old. And it's really avoidance. It's avoidance of taking responsibility and avoidance of helping my kids learn how to take appropriate responsibility at the right time. And then the high grace, high truth is the call in, call up culture. And this is what we're aiming at, because this is a picture of Jesus. And this is a place of safety. So my kiddos feel safe. I'm protecting them, but it's also a relationship of consistency. They know what to expect. They know how I'm going to approach conversations. They know that I'm not going to give them more than they can handle. And so I want to give you an image of this. This is an image that Nicole and I talk about all the time when we talk to our kids about whatever hard conversation we're talking about. We talk about having a bag, that each one of our kids has a bag or a backpack. And every time we have a difficult conversation with them, or we're teaching them something new, we're putting a different rock inside of that bag. And so here I have a bag. It's one of our One Life bags, all right? And so if I'm having a conversation with my 11-year-old about things of what it means to be a man, or we're having conversations about sex, or we're having conversations about religion, or we're having conversations about this crisis that we're all facing, then every time we have one of those conversations, then I'm putting a new rock in his bag. Now, what is important to see is that I might put 2 of these massive stones in this bag, and for me, that's not too heavy yet, because I have a lot of life experience. I've built up some endurance. I've built up some ability to be able to carry this bag. But if I handed this to my 11-year-old son, it's going to feel a lot more heavy to him than it is to me. Hopefully this imagery is making sense. So if I keep putting rocks inside of his bag, and if you can imagine this being a backpack on his shoulders, then eventually this bag is going to be way too heavy. He's probably going to be bent over, or he's going to be falling backwards, because I'm expecting him to carry way too much. That is not creating a culture, a relationship of safety and consistency. He has no idea what to expect. So I'm going to go first, and then I'm going to have my friends share their experience. But I was actually just sharing this with Nicole today, that when it comes to this crisis with COVID-19 and this virus that we're facing, our current reality, I can catch myself talking through it. I'm an external processor. I don't know if you guys know this or not, okay? I do talk for a living. So I'm an external processor. So I'll be walking around the house talking to Nicole about this thing, about something I saw on Twitter or an article I read, and we're talking about it while my kids are in the same room. And I might be talking about, like, you know, how many deaths there were today, or what the government said about this about today, or the report I received in my email. And my kids are getting to the point now at 11 and 9 where they like lean in, and they're listening to conversations that I'm having at an adult level, and their little minds are not ready to process it in the same way that I'm processing it. And so I see that. I see myself sometimes leaning towards the hangout culture, like I'm just processing externally, but also sometimes I fall into the overwhelming, like, hey, this is just the current reality, and you all need to be on the same page. Like, let's just talk about it. And I know that I feel the tension, and I know that it raises my anxiety. So can you imagine what that's doing to my kids, because they're not quite ready to carry the same load that I'm carrying, all right? So for me, I can go back and forth between overwhelming and hangout whenever I'm feeling overwhelmed, whenever I'm trying to process what I'm experiencing it. And I expect my kids just to walk in that with me. So what I want to do now Nathan, why don't you go first? Where do you tend to lean in the hangout, checkout, overwhelming? Which one do you tend to fall in the most often?
Yeah, I spend time in all three of those. I think my tendency is definitely, especially when the whole family is home, to operate in the hangout. And it's easy for me to take that route. It in the midst of long days or long weeks, it's also easy for me to drift down into checkout where I'm not doing what I need to do to take care of myself. And then, I don't engage well. I'm more worried about, getting myself, alive to bedtime a lot more than being present for the family.
Yeah. Can you think of a story where you experienced one of those with your kids, maybe even the past couple weeks? Does a story come to mind?
Sure. Yeah. And this is honestly an example of when I'm neither of those two, when I'm in the overwhelming, but I could say I move between the three. There are, I think for me, bedtime is a time where I usually operate in overwhelming. I'm just trying to get stuff done. Like, let's eat these snacks. Let's drink this water. They drink 9% of their water in the 20 minutes before bed, and let's brush our teeth. And, that's when they want to jump on their beds and it's just like, I'm very I'm ready to have a little bit of time. And they just aren't having it. So that 45 minutes tends to be really chaotic, and I lose any sense of grace, any sense of, hey, let's engage and make this moment meaningful. And it's all about what has to be done.
That's good. Nicole, how about you? Where do you tend to land in those three quadrants?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yep.
Good, sorry. I think the place that I see myself is in the low truth, low grace. I think that I let my fear take over because I'm scared to say the wrong thing in some situations, or I'm wanting to make a conversation that I'm waiting to have some monumental moment in my kid's life. And this will happen when I let myself believe the lie that I only have one shot at this conversation with them. And that I think that it's going to be one conversation that's going to make or break them for the rest of their future.
Yeah.
So I tend to do either I say very little or I just say nothing at all and I ignore it.
Can you think of a story that goes along with that?
Of course. The story that came to mind first is not recent, but it was early on in my homeschooling career. And it was back to school time, and we would encounter people in public, maybe, the grocery store clerk or strangers in the park who don't know us. And we would find ourselves in conversations with them, and they would ask the kids about going back to school. And we would just kind of fumble and laugh through the answers of our questions to these about what grade the kids were in and if they were excited about going back to school. And instead of me sitting them down and talking to them about their answers to these questions and how they're different than the typical answers that kiddos would have, I just ignored it. And we just continued to laugh and fumble through our questions with everybody that beginning of the year, before school started that year. I think I was worried about saying the wrong thing, about maybe not having the right answers to their questions and their emotions. why don't we go to public school? Or I didn't want to say the wrong thing, Yeah. So that was an example.
Good. Dawn, how about you? Where do you tend to land?
I definitely tend to land in the overwhelming culture, especially when it comes to a medical question. and I get asked a lot of medical questions by people of all age ranges, particularly children, like my kids or my niece and nephew. They'll ask me a question. And one of the things I do as a doctor is I train young doctors. So if one of the kids in my life that I love asks me a medical question, it's like I go into teaching a young doctor gear, and literally I like get out my textbooks and like walk them through the whole process. And like, I can tell you an example of that. This is years ago when my niece, who's now 21, was little. She was asking me like anatomical questions. I'm like, let's get out my anatomy book. Let me just show you. And my sister was like, what are you doing? And to me, I'm like, well, she asked a question. She's smart enough to answer. You know, and it was just high truth. And it was true, very true, very scientifically accurate. But it was a lot of rocks in a bag that she was not ready to carry. And so yeah. I still make this mistake, but I have come a long way. Can I get a head nod? Yeah. Still working on that. And it's interesting. It's really with kids, like my kids. Like if I have a patient, I can tend to balance that a little bit better, but it's people that I'm responsible for. A kid that I'm parenting that I tend to do that with. So yeah.
That's good. That's good. Thank you guys for being honest. Because we don't get it right all the time or half the time. But it's important with this matrix. What I love about this matrix is that we can see where we really are. And we say this all the time at One Life, that if we can be where we really are because God meets us where we really are. And so we don't have to pretend like, oh man, I'm the greatest parent of all time. And whenever I'm having really hard conversations, I'm always nailing the call in, call up culture. And so tonight with this webinar, we wanted to make sure that we were super honest. Like probably the higher percentage of the time, we are existing in these three places. There's no experts here. I don't know about you, like Nathan and I have been saying this, like none of us have been through a worldwide pandemic. So there's no experts on how to have a conversation with a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 13-year-old, an 18-year-old on how to deal with our emotions. Like there's no experts. There's no experts in parenting. And so we just wanted to be able to be honest, and hopefully that's encouraging to you. What I do want to ask is for the three of you to think about a time and to tell us about a time when you did seem to hit the bullseye. That you leaned into the call in, call up culture. I believe stories are, they shape us. They're the most powerful way to communicate what we're learning. And so if you could think of a story about in a time when you were having a difficult conversation with your kids and you created a safe place for them, a consistent place for them, and you were calling them in. So when we talk about call in, call up, call in is that, as Henry Nouwen says, that we are able to articulate our inner experience. So we want to help our children be able to understand what they're experiencing on their inside. So call in, but also call up towards God, because we want to always be pointing them to who God is in the person of Jesus. So that's the call in, call up culture. We want them to help our kiddos understand what's happening inside of them emotionally, physically, mentally, all those things, but also call them up towards something bigger than themselves and something more full and something more holistic than themselves, which is God the Father. So Nathan, I'm gonna ask you to go first. Can you tell us a story about a time whenever you feel like you hit the bullseye and you were having a conversation with your kids and you were like, man, that was a call in, call up moment?
Sure, yeah. And let me qualify this, not that it needs qualified, that, these moments are rare, but the goal for me, and I think for any of us, is that we keep showing up to these moments. It's not about perfection. It's about being willing to show up. And but yeah, I had a week or so ago, I had a moment that I think went better than expected. And so our boys like a lot of pretty much all the kids in the county, they're off school as of last week, and so we're trying to help them continue learning at home. And last week was rough, and we weren't doing that great. I definitely wasn't doing that great. Emily was doing a lot better than I was. And Grady came in. I had sat him down. He'd come up with a plan of what he was going to do, and he came into our bedroom like 2 minutes later, and he was like just not paying attention. He was goofing off. And I said, "Bud, we need to work on a little bit of stuff because it's probably going to be this way for a while." And he's like, "What do you mean if that was only 2 weeks?" I'm like, "Well, right now it's 2 weeks, but I think it might be a little bit longer than that." He's like, "How long?" I'm like, "Well, I mean, it could be the rest of the school year. We don't know." And so Grady's 9, almost 10. Brennan comes in and he's 7, and he's like a human pinball, and you can't hold his attention more than 2 seconds. And he never listens to anything. And he's bouncing around the room, and he stops and he looks at me and he said, "No school for the rest of the year? Is it really that bad?" And it caught me off guard because that's not really a Brennan sort of question. And so I took a second and I said, "I don't know, bud, but I do know that us and your teachers aren't going to let you go back to school until it's completely safe for you to be there." And that was okay with him, and he took off, and that was probably the last serious conversation I had with him that day. But it goes to that safety and consistency of communicating safety, in that case really literally, and that he knew that life was going to be consistent. He knew what he could expect until it was time for him to go back. And so that was my best effort.
Nathan, you told us when we were offline having this conversation as a counselor that in order for our kids to grow up and to be healthy emotionally, mentally, that safety and consistency are they are necessary. That they're at least they should be our aim as parents, that we're creating a culture and environment of safety and consistency. Can you speak to that just for a moment?
Yeah, I mean, safety is I mean, yes, first of all, everything you said, it's paramount to emotional health. And safety looks like knowing you have a roof over your head, knowing where your next meal is going to come from, knowing that your parents and the other adults in your life are looking out for your best interests, that you are safe and secure. Consistency is quite a bit more broad. I mean, that is everything from routine, so that whatever routine your family has, they kind of know what's coming, what to expect, to just knowing the way that you're going to respond to them is as consistent as possible, for discipline or we don't eat a snack an hour before dinner, like just those sorts of things. Like they know that there's predictability and reliability in their life. And if those two things are there, they're going to grow up as, in a very emotionally balanced way.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. And it's important that those two things are present, even in unstable, inconsistent seasons. And so we talk a lot about, when we talk about anxiety, that as parents, we want to be the calm presence for our kids. We used to use the idea of non-anxious, but let's be honest, like none of us are not anxious. So we're all going to experience anxiety, but can we, in an inconsistent season in our kids' lives, an unstable season in our kids' lives, can we be a calm presence whenever our kids jump in and say, "Is it really that bad?" Like, we don't lose our cool, we don't start sweating, but instead we can be calm, just like you were in that one instance. And so I think would you agree with that?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think I've been having this conversation 25 times a week for the last 2 weeks, which is none of us feel safe right now. just because we don't know, we don't know what this thing's going to do. And so all of us as adults, we don't feel very safe. You know, I had one client who runs and she said, I feel like this thing is chasing me as I run. And she's like, she's a nurse. She knows that's crazy, but she's like, it just feels like generally unsafe. And then consistency, we don't know what to expect. Like we have no idea what this thing is going to do. It might be on its way out the door in 3 weeks. You know, we might still be sitting here in 3 months. We just don't know. And so that lack of predictability, reliability, that everything in life is hard. It is extremely important that we get a handle on those things, because that's going to carry right over to our kids. Like our kids are going to match our emotional tone on those things. So,
oh man, we could run down that rabbit hole of family systems, but we can't do that tonight. Maybe another webinar. All right. Dawn, how about you? A story about a time when you nailed it, when you hit the nail on the head with call in, call up culture.
Michael just brought to mind, this is not the story I was going to share, but where I actually went through 3 of these quadrants in this one scenario. We were actually in town here in Kannapolis actually, and we drove past a homeless individual on the side of the road, and Cole was old enough to read the sign, and he's like, oh, mom, like, you're a doctor, you can help him, like, look, do you see that? And I'm like, we got somewhere to be. We don't have, basically I started into this, we don't have time. And then like, when I said that, the look that he gave me, like, or do I even know you kind of look like, you help people. What do you mean you can't help this person? So I instantly started heading into the overwhelming culture corner, where I was like, well, let me tell you about our homeless population. You know, like, these are often, you know, now I started that way and actually pulled over on the side of the road, and I turned around and I said, you are right, Cole, because in our conversation, he's like, but God cares about them. And I'm like, gosh, so right. So I pulled over and I'm like, Cole, I don't know the right answer, but let's figure it out together. Let's research it. So we went home and we called like different homeless shelters and looked at different online resources to find out kind of what would be some needs and what could be some things. And it's something very simple with and I'm sure you guys have seen them, like the blessing bags. Michael called them the homeless bags. We decided that wasn't a good name for them, but it was the blessing bags. It has different supplies that most homeless shelters recommend that you give out, and try to avoid things that you wouldn't put in there. And the kids loved, like, they could not wait to see a homeless person to give them these bags. So anyway, it was just interesting how he kind of brought me through 3 of those quadrants before I feel like not that it's a perfect answer, there's no great solution, but it was an interesting parenting moment.
That's great. The one thing that caught my attention there was you were able to say, I don't know, but let's research it together. And how important that is for our kids. Like, especially in this season, guys, you're not going to have all the answers. And it's okay to be the one that says, I don't know right now, but let's research it together. You know, let's talk about that. Nicole, I want you to share yours, but I want you to say what you said to us earlier this week about teaching our kids to use Google and how important that is. So when is a time when you hit the nail on the head here?
Okay. All right, I have 2 and I'm having a really hard time deciding which one to share. I guess the most recent one is how we have been talking about puberty and our kids' bodies changing and their emotions changing. I've found myself successful in these conversations because I feel like I've let them do the leading in these conversations, and I don't necessarily mean that they're always the ones asking the questions, but as somebody who's gone through puberty, I know like how my body changed, and I know how their bodies are going to change. So sometimes I just, I see the changes happening, and then I let that be my cue into the conversations that we've been having. So something really powerful through these conversations that we've been having with them is that I'm learning that the lie that these conversations are like one and done, and that I only have one chance is not true, because we talk about it all the time now, and they come to me with questions, and I'm not always ready for them. but I like the fact that they actually come to me and that they are asking me these questions. And I feel like if I wouldn't have engaged in the conversation with them in the first place, that they may not have come to me with these questions.
Yeah.
And something else that I've really learned through this is that these conversations can be long, but they can also be literally like 30 seconds. So.
And you said to us that these are awesome opportunities for us to teach them how to do research.
Mm-hmm.
So we research alongside of them, because this generation has more access than ever before. And so if we don't teach them, they'll either learn on their own or somebody else will teach them. And so the importance of doing that together, just like Don was saying, like, hey, let's go do this together. Let's go research this together. And so then you Google it, and there's 5 billion answers, and
right,
4,999,999 of those are terrible suggestions, and you shouldn't ever believe them.
right.
And teaching them to sift through that and discern that. And the only way you do that is to do it together.
Literally do it together, right?
Yeah.
And you might open a web page and start reading some sentences and be like, oh, this isn't where we're going to find our answer. Let's look at another one. And let them see you do that.
Yeah, that's so good. I'm going to share mine, and then we're going to open up to some Q&R here. Mine happened around this conversation with about COVID-19. Marcus has been really frustrated. He worked really hard this winter and this spring, preparing for the baseball season. He was working out 5 days a week, getting stronger, getting better. He was just super excited. And then when all this went down, that was taken away. And he's very, he is emotional, but tends to like not wake up on the wrong side of the bed. And there was about 3 or 4 days there. I was like, dude, I think an alien took over your body. And one day he just broke out like in tears. Like we were sitting in the church parking lot, and he just exploded. And I was like, dude, what is going on? And he was just really sad and really frustrated. And we had the conversation about why we were deciding not to go to baseball practice, even if the team was going to practice. And I helped him see that. I was like, buddy, this isn't just about you. Like, this isn't just about me. This is about my grandma, my mom and dad, his grandma and grandpa, like that live right next door to us. Like that if one of us were carrying this and they got this, that they would be this could be really bad. And I didn't go into all the details and all the statistics and all the things that I read, but that we want to help protect them so that they don't get really sick. And I didn't tell him that my parents could die or anything like that. Like he didn't need to know any of that. Just that we want to do our best to protect his grandma and grandpa. And you could see a light bulb click, like, oh, like, yeah, this is really important. And he's been a different kid. Like, he's probably still mad, and he probably still has his moments when he's sad. But it makes more sense. And I didn't go into all the details because he couldn't wrap his mind around all that. I can't even wrap my mind around it. But he needed to know, like, this is really important, and you play a part in this. And so that was one moment whenever I did something right. And so, yeah, I was pretty proud of that moment. All right, we're going to open it up for about 10, 12 minutes here, 15 minutes, and just do a little bit of Q&R. I say Q&R because it's question and responses. We're probably not going to give you all the answers, but we will help walk through this. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and open up the chat. And you can type a question, or you can unmute yourself and you can ask the question, and then we'll have a conversation about it. Any questions you guys have that came to mind?
You want me to share my other thing while people come up with questions?
Oh, that would be great. So it's not super awkward.
Yeah,
Can't
that's
stand
what I
it.
was just thinking.
All right, good.
So the other thing is that we've been dealing with lately is I have noticed my kids' unhealthy responses to situations. Like they'll explode when it's really not any necessary at all. So we started talking about, well, first of all, I noticed that I do that myself sometimes. So that's probably where, they got it from. So we talked about that we can pray about this together, that we can lovingly call each other out when this happens, since we're with each other a lot. And I think that probably the most powerful thing that I have talked about with them through this whole, like, you have control of your emotions and nobody else has control of them. You decide whether you're going to let yourself get out of control in this moment or not. You're the only one who can do that. I can't do that. You are the only one. So I think that's been really helpful. We've also used this like picture of your emotions being like a calm, peaceful sea or like a raging ocean. And that has been very helpful. All I have to say is calm, peaceful, or you are a raging ocean right now. Yeah. And it just kind of centers us and helps us, get back on track.
Yeah.
There's mine. No questions yet.
Anybody got a question? Kathy has a question. Here, I'll unmute you. There you go.
Okay. So, my biggest concern is like Roman's academic spurt is always on the third quarter of the school year. Like he literally just leaps to another level. So I was kind of wanting to ask Nicole, like, in your day-to-day, like schooling, are you an enforcer? Like how does your general day look?
That's a great question.
Yeah. I was just having this conversation with somebody today. I can totally tell you how my day works, but you are not me, and Marcus is not Roman. So hear what I say, but then also don't take it all verbatim. Like it's different situations. So I have found that my kids' best time to get work done is in the morning. If we're not started by 8:30 or 9 o'clock, the whole entire morning's a wash. If I decide to just take the morning off, let them, take it easy and try to start school after lunch, I might as well just go to bed after lunch. Like it's not worth it. So I have found that their best few hours to get work done is right away after they've eaten, after they've rested. I mean, that's when we all work the best. And if they don't want to do it, I still push them. Like I know that this is our best chance to get the work done. So once you can find when that might be for Roman, he's probably still not going to want to do it, but you're going to probably still have to push him to do it. Is that good?
What'd you say, Kathy?
Yeah. Oh, I was just thinking like Roman likes to contest me quite often. So like, I'm anticipating that it's going to be that battle, like that when you have to choose like every single minute of the battle you have to choose.
Mm-hmm.
I can't be here to help because my job's considered essential. So
yeah,
yeah,
I'm still going to work.
if I could maybe share this, just speak to this, and it's more overarching because Nicole is the one that teaches the kids at home. But so remember that in the high grace, high truth, that consistency is really important. And so consistency, and remember that high truth is about responsibility. So what just comes to mind is that consistent rhythms equal security. We operate best when we feel secure as human beings. We operate at the highest capacity, at the highest level when we feel secure. When we feel insecure, then things start to go downhill pretty quickly. And so how important it is in this season, if it's 3 more weeks, if it's 8 more weeks, that we give our kids consistent rhythms. But the other thing that just came to mind is responsibility. And so, whether it's Roman or Marcus or Madeline, that they're old enough that we could sit down with them and say, like, let's create a schedule together. And so they start taking responsibility for themselves. They take responsibility for their schedule. And that's really important as we're raising little adults. And so I think it would be important for us to put that ball into their court and help them take some responsibility. And then whenever they throw a fit, because we have 2 very hard-headed children, when they throw a fit, then to be able to say, you are the one that established this, and I'm helping you stick to your word. And you took responsibility for this, and so now you're going to have to lean into it and let your yes be yes and your no be no. So I think we can help our kids take some responsibility when it comes to high grace, high truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's kind of what Crystal just said too. I don't know if you can see what she said, but she said one thing that helped when we were homeschooling. I created a list of everything that had to be done in the day, and she could choose the order in which it got done.
Okay,
so that's
smart.
Good too. And then when
that's
it doesn't,
also taking that responsibility.
Right.
Yeah.
When it doesn't go as planned, literally just stop and pray together. Like, it might sound a little ridiculous, but we do that very often.
Yeah. That's a good idea, actually.
Now, somebody
prayer, not a spanking hand.
I like this video chat. I mean, I feel like this whole COVID-19 has literally separated all of us on a human level, and which it has, and it's sad. So I appreciate this for sure.
Yeah. Well, and that was one thing Crystal asked, any suggestions on meeting social needs for an extrovert? Don, Nathan, do you want to speak to that at all? I mean, I'm an extrovert, Nicole's an extrovert. Like, as you guys work with patients, as you work with clients who are super extroverted, how would you encourage someone who's an extrovert and is now feels isolated?
Yeah, really creatively. Because I mean, these are days where we have to be creative, and so there's a lot of good technology tools that help us connect in creative ways. So a big way that guys connect these days is through video games, through playing a video game together and just talking. And so I've encouraged a couple of my guys' clients who are trying to be productive. I'm like, well, don't forget people. Like, you need people. And if that means, if the best chance for you to have a conversation is to play video games with a buddy, don't feel like that's not productive. Like, you need that. Another way is, I think Chrome, the web browser, has an extension for Netflix that lets you watch Netflix together at the same time. So you can actually go to Netflix and press play, and it will sync it up, and you can sync, so you could watch Netflix with other people in your own homes while with other people. And so I think it's being creative and thinking, like, how can I do things I enjoy and relax and stay in my own space, social distance, while still inviting other people into that. That doesn't have to be isolating activity.
Sorry, it's habit.
Yeah.
I want to speak to that, Nathan, because we call them Kairos moments. I had a massive kairos this week during staff meeting on Tuesday. I was feeling very frustrated because typically my schedule during the week is full of people. I'm having coffee with people, I'm eating lunch with people. Typically 5 days a week, I have a lunch with someone. And this happened. I'm like, I don't think I'm going to meet with anybody for the rest of my life. I don't even know what's happening. And so I'm saying this and naming this in staff meeting. And Amy Newman, who works with us, she says, well, why can't you? And I was like, oh, what do you mean? And she said, why couldn't you set up a Zoom with Michael Cavanis and you both have a coffee and you drink coffee together and you meet?
Mm-hmm.
And I sat back in my chair and was like, holy junk, that's the most brilliant thing I've ever heard in my life. And I, for some reason, because it's abnormal, I couldn't imagine that. And so we say a lot, like, we need a new imagination. We need a new imagination with this, you know, like, you could both fix dinner and get on Zoom, get on FaceTime and eat dinner together. We need a new imagination. As extroverts, we're going to need that. As introverts, we're going to need this. So I've said this, like, being extroverted is not an excuse for us not to rest and remain and practice solitude with the Father. Being an introvert is not an excuse for us to not love our neighbor and connect with other human beings. And so this isn't just a question of extrovert or introvert. This is a question of humanity and humans, that we're going to need a new imagination to connect with each other and love one another and encourage one another over the next few weeks and be the church. And the incredible thing is in 2020, we've got some technology to be able to do that. I even I've seen things on Instagram, which are so cool. People doing drive-bys. Kathy, you did this for your daughter's birthday. Like, JT and Jess did this for Aiden's birthday. Like, we went to JT and Jess's house and said hi, you know, from the driveway. Like, you could call your friend and say, we're on our way to your house. We're going to stand out on the road and we're going to hang out and talk. You know, I mean, we can do that. You can, on your way to the gas station starting tomorrow, okay? That you can, on your way to the grocery store, go by your friend's house. And I know, Jocelyn, I loved it. I don't know if you guys saw this post Jocelyn had on Facebook, but they did. They went over to Mike and Kate Wilson's house and they said hello and they wrote a card for them. Guys, we can do this. We can do this. We can have a new imagination to love one another and to connect with one another. We just have to think outside of what's been normal to this point. So yeah, that was a huge kairos for me. All right, one more question. I want to be really respectful of your time. I hope this was good for you guys. I hope it was good for me. One more question, and then Don, Nathan, Nicole, I'm going to ask you at the end to encourage us, like, just give an encouraging word as we finish up. So anybody else have a question? Counting down in my head.
If nobody else does, I can have one, but.
Okay, go ahead. What's your question?
I am wondering, I know this is really weighted for the last question of the night, but if we have filled our child's backpack too full, then what? Right.
That's where Nathan makes his money.
That's why Nathan will always have
stability.
He'll always have job stability. I'll say something, and then Nathan, you can use this time as your encouraging word. I will say it's never too late to start, to be intentional, and repentance is the idea of starting new. Like I've been overloading my kid's bag. The kindness of the Lord leads us to repentance, of metanoia, of transformation. And so it's not the Lord like pounding us, but it's the kindness of the Lord showing us that we're living in one of those other three quadrants and leading us to something new. So don't beat yourself up. Guilt, shame, fear are not from the Lord. The kindness of the Lord leads us to new intentional rhythms and patterns. And we can now do something new where we can start to be very intentional and careful with what we're putting in our kids' bag. It's not a lost cause. And we can do something new. So that's what I would say from a pastor. Nathan, what would you say? And this is your encouraging word.
My encouraging word would be kids are really resilient, and they are great at bouncing back from tough times. I think something we can do to help that along is to not be afraid to be really engaged in relationship with them. To what are we doing to spend time with them that has no purpose other than the relationship? And I think that can undo a lot of heavy rocks, whether they come from us or other people, or bus rides home, or those rocks come from lots of places. And that our relationship, it's going to open doors and open pathways for meaningful conversations in the future, conversations we need to have. The grace and truth.
That's great. Great word. Dawn, how about you? What's your encouraging word?
Thinking particularly about the coronavirus and our need to feel safe. Like you said, there's so much that's outside of our control right now, but I think I'm saying this to you guys as parents, and then hopefully that will trickle down to your children, that I'm really proud of our local health department. I'm really, really proud to be a part of Atrium Health and the other hospitals in the area that have all been working really hard together. I cannot begin to tell you the number of emails, the coordinated efforts, meetings between Cone, Novant, Atrium, so that we can all work together and then organize all of us doctors underneath each of those umbrellas so that we can all be prepared and ready to take care of your families. It's really something that we've all been trained to deal with, but we've never had to do it. It's kind of like, something you read about in textbook and you know what to do. It's just the actual how to roll that out and provide the care for the volume of patients. And that's what our community's been working really, really hard to do. So I want you guys to know that as parents, that there is a team of doctors and hospitals that are working really, really hard to be here. And I appreciate being part of a church who has really taken social distancing very seriously. And then I think too, like just when my kids ask, like, well, what happens if I get this? We're going to take care of you. We're going to take care of you. Dr. Steinbacher, who's your doctor, she's going to take good care of you. I'm going to take care of you. Simple messages that are true. So.
That's really good. That's great. Thank you. Nicole, what encouraging word would you leave with us?
I would say, in regard to schooling your child while probably trying to do other things at home, to take it day by day and to lean on each other. We still have our phones. If you're having a rough morning, hour, day, call somebody and talk to them. I know one thing that has made my homeschooling journey even a possibility is the fact that I know I'm not alone and that I have other people to talk to. And maybe they're not dealing with the exact same thing I am, but they have probably dealt with something similar to it, or they're in the same boat as you, at least. So
Great
to call
word.
somebody and talk to them.
Great word. I just want to leave you with John chapter 1, verse 17. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. And so this is not something that we do on our own. It is something that we do in Christ. we have these conversations, we lead our kids, we disciple our kids, we homeschool our kids now. We do all of this in Christ. And so I want to encourage you as parents to find time to remind yourself that your identity is solid in Christ, so that your leading of your kids, your raising of your kids, your teaching of your kids, your conversations can flow from that place. So thank you so much for hanging out with us. We're going to do this every other Wednesday, and I don't know what the next one's going to be, so I can't announce that. We'll see where we go. I'm thinking that it's going to be something around how do we deal with loneliness. And so we'll make some announcements over the next few weeks. But thank you so much for being our guinea pigs. It was a lot of fun. Don, thank you. Nathan, thank you. Nicole, thank you. You all were brilliant and beautiful. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful night, everybody.